I'm embarrassed to admit it really, but I suppose gardening has never been in my DNA. Um, when my wife wants some heavy work doing in the garden, I'm your man. But alas, I'm not very fond of heavy work in the garden, so I try to avoid it under all circumstances, and that in a certain sense makes it even less fulfilling for me, because I never get there to do it and see the good results. On one occasion I successfully, as a young man, persuaded my mother that I could prune the one enormous rose bush that we had in the garden, and it died. Having said that, according to Dorothy Frances Gurney, one is nearer God's heart in a garden than anywhere else on earth. And I do love gardens, and gardens appear in John's narrative of the crucifixion and resurrection all over the place. It's the same garden from time to time, but it's in a garden that Jesus is faced with the reality of what's going to happen in his life when he prays that it might all be over. It's in a garden that he is arrested. It's in a garden tomb that he is buried, and on Sunday it's the gardener in a garden whom Mary meets, and of course the gardener is Jesus. Every time you talk about garden, you tend to think, at least I tend to think, of that Garden of Eden, which is where Adam and Eve ate the apple and they clothe themselves because they shouldn't have eaten that apple, and they realize that they're naked, and then they hide, and then God comes looking for them in the garden. "Where are you?" he says. Suddenly the tables are turned here. It is in this garden that God in Jesus Christ is not hiding from anyone, and it's the people descended from Adam and Eve, takes a bit of thinking about this does, who actually come looking for God this time, instead of God looking for the people. Of course they don't realize that it's God that they are looking for. From their perspective, they're just looking for a human being who has done wrong, which is just like God was doing to Adam and Eve. The whole mess of this is incredibly ironic. There is irony in everything. Bishop Tom Wright points out that, like all humans, he says, they are looking for God, but they don't know that's what they're doing. I love this picture of all humans looking for God without realizing that that's what we're doing. But that's the kind of searching for meaning and value in life that everybody wants. To understand what our role is in creation is really, really, really important. Why are we here? People are looking for God, and this mob is not just doing a job, but actually they're out there looking for God. They come, he says, with torches and lanterns in the dark to arrest the light of the world. You can't get more ironic than that. And when they find him, Jesus gives them ammunition. Ammunition for his own demise. "I am," he says. "I am he." "I am," he says. "I am he." As soon as you use that word, or those words, "I am," again you're taken back into the Old Testament, the picture of Moses looking at the bush that was burning but not being consumed, and saying, "Who are you?" And the bush says, "I am who I am." And Moses knew that that meant it was God. When Jesus says I am the way, the truth and the life, when he says I am the good shepherd, and so on, when he says I am he, and he says it twice, I told you, I am he, they will know. They will know what he is claiming, and they don't like it. They think because he is claiming that, he is a sinner. Little do they realize that it's actually God claiming to be God. And if you look for more irony, you go to when he is taken to Annas and Caiaphas, the previous and current high priest. These are, as Bishop Wright says, these are God's official representatives on earth, and it's they who are leading the shout to crucify. God's official representatives on earth are calling for a death sentence on God. So much for good ambassadorial office. And why is this happening? It's happening so that the relationship that they are breaking by torture and crucifixion can be restored by God's self-sacrificial love. Do you know, I say all these words and I think how complicated the whole thing is. But it's complicated because it's so full of irony. You get overload of irony as you go through it. The priests shout, he saved others but he cannot save himself. And of course they're saying precisely what Jesus is choosing not to do. He is choosing not to save himself in order that he can save others. The mocking words of the soldiers as they flog him, and Pilate's words pinned on the cross, there to enrage the church leaders. This is the King of the Jews. Happened to be true. It's all ironic. It's irony that it's happening like this. John is writing late in his life, maybe the age of 80 or thereabouts, AD 90, something like that. He sees all this after a lifetime of reflection. I guess that when you do spend time reflecting, when you do have time to look back on life, you do see irony. You do understand that some of the things that have happened to you seem to be miraculously ironic. And you ask, sometimes I ask too, why the Church of England is seems to be full of people who are more elderly than young. And maybe that's because they have that opportunity to reflect on what their life is about and where their life has been, and see that God has actually been working through their lives, and they want to come and praise him for all that they have received. We discern the subtlety of irony, of us being in some place where we thought we had all the control and we knew what was going on and we were doing what we thought we wanted to do. But actually we were gently being taken and guided into that place, even to a garden maybe, even to a garden with a cross in it, where God was rescuing us. The irony of not really being in control is that irony when Jesus looks as though he is completely helpless in the hands of human beings. But ultimately, this is his choice, his way. God, much to the surprise of those arresting him, is completely in control. Lord, may you be the one who is always in control of our lives, directing us and giving us a clarity that we can see by reflection your presence in all that we have ever been. Amen.